Howdy gamers, let's talk about the runes for Cassiopeia. It's mostly going to be for Cassiopeia mid, even though she can be played top and AD. Most of the variations most of the rune variations also just transition to those roles in about the exact same way. So starting off with the Keystone, it's going to be Conqueror. Your basic attacks or spells that deal damage to enemy champions grant you 2 stacks of Conqueror for 6 seconds, giving you bonus adaptive force, which is going to be AP. Stacking up to 10 times for ranged champions, they only gain 1 stack per basic attack, and then when it's fully stacked, you heal for 15% of the damage you deal to champions. Now, and that's only 8% for Cassiopeia since you're ranged. The utility of Conqueror with Cassiopeia makes it so that in the early game, you're going to be offsetting a lot of the AP advantage that the enemy champion is going to have through itemization, since you have to buy tier early. Whenever you start fighting them and then you're stacking it up, you're going to get about around 30 AP whenever you're level 9, so you're still going to be able to match them somewhat in terms of the AP you have with just having mana items. And then once it's fully stacked, then you're also going to start healing off all the damage that you deal. Now this, in combination with the second runes and just with Cassiopeia's kit in general, is gonna make you like 3 times the strength of a normal carry, as Cassiopeia is like one of the hardest carrying champions in the game because you can deal so much damage while also healing and while also tanking so much. So this rune is early game, you offset the cost of AP, and then the healing utility is kind of negligible as you're just farming early. And then come mid game, whenever you start fights or your team starts fights, or even better yet, when the enemy's trying to dive onto you, and then you take a bit of initial damage, but then you proc Conquer and you actually land a Q on someone, and then you can start spamming the E, you're just going to heal back to full and then also be dealing more damage because Conquer is stacked. It's so powerful, and in combination with Cassiopeia, so long that you have a fight set up for you, is one of the strongest things in the game. Second rune is going to be Presence of Mind. Takedowns restore 20% of your maximum mana, and then permanently increase your mana by 100 up to 500. So this is also pretty like insanely valuable, as whenever you are fighting, it's pretty easy to run out of mana, especially before you have your tier stacked on Cassiopeia. Any killer assist is going to restore 20% of it, which is going to give you at least like 4 or 5 like Q and E cast just in a single team fight. And then if you're getting multiple assists, then it's obviously going to just ramp up in that sense. So in solo queue, it has like this nice kind of just bonus utility factor where you don't even have to think about it. Just whenever you're winning fights, you're going to have more mana to kill the next guy. But even when games are close, in a team fight, having that extra mana can make or break things. And then even if you're only getting like 5 kills or assists in a game, you're still going to be permanently increasing your mana pool by up to 500, which is much more than you can get from other runes such as Mana Flow or Biscuits. So that's that. Third rune is going to be Legend Tenacity. You gain 5% Tenacity and an additional 2.5 for every Legend stack. You basically gain a Legend stack for doing almost anything, getting a killer assist, killing objectives, minions, etc. The Tenacity for Cassiopeia makes her even more gross, as you can't purchase Merc Treads on this champion, but through this rune you can get the Tenacity. You obviously wouldn't get any value from the other legend runes with the attack speed or the lifesteal, but with the Tenacity it makes it even harder for the enemy to single you out, as that's basically their only play against the Cassiopeia, is to have hard CC against her whenever a team fight starts, and then Tenacity is going to lessen that effects, or those effects. And if you have any supports behind you, especially enchanter supports like Ivern, Janna, Morgana, etc., it's going to be so hard for the enemy to get onto you and then basically just win the game, because if they can't get onto you, Cassiopeia is probably winning. Fourth rune is going to be Last Stand. Coup de Grace has okay value, but it's kind of like a win more rune versus um, a rune that gives you utility even if you're winning or if you're losing. Or not if you're losing, if things are going even. Because with Last Stand, you deal 5 to 11% increased damage to champions while you are below 60% health, and then max damage gained at 30% health. So with Cassiopeia, it's fine to get chunked early in a fight, or just to lose health as you're initially trading onto someone, as you're going to be healing from your abilities, and you're also going to be healing from Conquer, and then from the secondary runes. So with this, you're going to be dealing more damage. Even if the enemy like got the jump on you, you're going to have very, very high turn potential. So let's say a Kiana jumps onto you, but then you place the W on yourself, you QE, and then R, and then you just spam the E on top of them, you're probably going to be winning, and you're going to be dealing more damage because of that. In close fights, it makes things in your favor even more, and if you're winning without it, it's even better because you just have this rune to fall back on, even if the enemy like gets the jump on you, or if fights are going like blow for blow and things are even. Secondary runes is going to be Domination with Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter. Taste of Blood, whenever you deal damage to the enemy champion, you heal for a bit, and this is on a 20-second cooldown. So in the laning phase, even if you take like a 1Q, 1E trade on the enemy, you're going to heal a bit from the Twin Fangs, but then you're also going to be able to proc Taste of Blood, which is going to help you offset the damage that you take from them. And then Ravenous Hunter is more for the late game, as you heal for a percentage of the damage dealt by your abilities. And Cassiopeia is just all about dealing damage with her abilities. And since her E single target, it's going to be dealing like more damage to heal you with this rune. It's based off a bounty hunter stack. The bounty hunter stack basically works like for each unique takedown. So if you kill the top laner, that's 1. If you kill the jungler, that's 2. Mid laner, ADC, support, etc. And then that's going to give you more and more percentage healing on your abilities, which is just so absolutely strong on Cassiopeia, man. For the adaptive runes, it's going to be ability power, and then depending on the matchup, you obviously want to switch the last rune as it's your defensive rune. So if you're playing into AD champions such as Lucian, Zed, Talon, Kiana, etc., you want to run armor. And then if you're playing into the AP matchups such as Syndra, Orianna, etc., you want to run the magic resist. So you do have to change that every single game. But these are the default runes I'd recommend for Cassiopeia. Now let's talk a bit about the variations. The first one being in the secondary runes for sorcery, where I see a lot of people running Mana Flow and Transcendence, or even Mana Flow and Gathering Storm. With first off, with Mana Flow and Transcendence, you already get pretty good value out of Presence of Mind, and whenever you run something other than Taste of Blood and then Ravenous Hunter secondary, you have to outweigh these two runes and the other runes that you would run, the other secondary runes. So with Mana Flow Transcendence, Mana Flow effectively just gives you a Sapphire Crystal for free. But Cassiopeia doesn't need that extra mana since you're already going to be getting it from Presence of Mind. And then with Transcendence, you get 10% CDR at level 10. But this Transcendence is more useful for control mages. Cassiopeia is like this hard carry champion. And these runes make her just carry way harder, as you have this like triple threat of healing, like almost quadruple threat of healing from Conqueror, Ravenous Hunter, Taste of Blood, and then Cassiopeia's abilities heal her naturally through her kit anyways. So that's why I don't see these runes outweighing them. Transcendence and Mana Flow make more sense for control mages, again, as the cooldown reduction matters on them more because they need to spam their abilities at max range. But with Cassiopeia, she doesn't have to do that. Once she's on a target, the amount of CDR she has is barely relevant. It's mostly about her position and then the items that she has at the time. So that's that. And then with the entirely different rune page, which is an okay option, you could run Phase Rush, Mana Flow, and then Transcendence, Gathering Storm. And then for secondary runes, you could have Biscuits and then Cosmic Insight. I suppose you could run Time Warp Tonic, but that's more of a laning rune. With this rune variation, the only utility I see in it would be if you're playing... You give up a lot of carry potential, and the first reason I think you would run this rune page is if you weren't the primary carry on your team, which it would still be fine to play Cassiopeia depending on the enemy team comp. You want to pick Cassiopeia whenever the enemy team comp has a lot of champions that have to dive onto your team. And in that case, Cassiopeia doesn't have to be the primary carry. So if you have additional carries on your team, champions like Graves, Misfortune, etc., where they can deal a bulk of the damage, but then you can use your spells, mostly the ult and then your W, to protect them, while also dealing damage yourself, and denying the enemy team altogether, then you can gain extra utility from a rune page like this. The benefit of Phase Rush is that whenever you hit an enemy champion with 3 attacks or separate abilities, Within 3 seconds, you gain bonus movement speed and then 75% slow resist, and then it's only on a 15-second cooldown. So in terms of team fights, I think this has very, very high utility against champions with like really strong zoning abilities, because again, I think you would be picking this depending on if you weren't the solo carry in the team composition, and then if you were trying to provide more utility for your team. So if the enemy team has champions that have to dive, and then also champions with good zone control, so think about champions like Talia with Talia's E, and then Talia's ult, and then champions like, or more so abilities like Graves' Smokescreen, abilities like Misfortune's E, Make It Rain, where it has a circle, and then the whole AoE is slowed, and then also Misfortune ult, where it creates this big zone, and then think about Rumble ult, think about Ornn ult. Whenever you're playing against abilities like that, and then you can drop the E to like halt the enemy team from progressing once they cast these abilities, and then also reposition yourself while they're casting them, and then trying to progress onto your team, then you can either be safer or provide more utility to your team in that way. And then that's just for team fighting. That's the only way I see this rune like working out. Early game, Phase Rush doesn't, it might give you lethal in some lanes. I don't know Cassiopeia like that well, but it might give you some lethal in some lanes mid lane where you would land a QE and then you could run them down. I'm not sure, but in side lanes, the huge utility of Phase Rush is even if the enemy gets on top of you, you could just drop W, QE, and then you could run away. That'd be the huge utility of it in the side lane, but I never see it ran bot lane, and then you could get really good value out of it top lane, obviously, because you're probably playing into a melee champion that wants to do exactly that. So that's the variation of this. Obviously, since you're not running Presence of Mind, you want the free mana from Mana Flow. You would also get free mana from Biscuits. These two combinations would kind of add up to Presence of Mind. Cosmic Insight's just a general utility rune. It would help you have your flash and teleport up more often. Transcendence, since you're running this page, you might as well have as much scaling as possible from the runes. The other page gives you more utility for scaling versus having inherent scaling in the runes themselves. In this page, Transcendence and Gathering Storm are going to give you more scaling just from the runes themselves, and then with the secondary or with the adaptive runes, they wouldn't change. You would obviously again want to change the resistances depending on the matchup. So that's that. You could also consider running this rune, as the CDR would potentially be more impactful to get more W's down or whatever. So again, here's the default runes one more time for Cassiopeia. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I answer literally all of them. And if this video helped you, leaving a like on the video helps me. Twitch.tv/Nelson, links in the description. I'll be playing support, man. Won't be playing Cassiopeia already. Bye-bye. See you later. Bye-bye. Cassiopeia is disgusting, man. What a good champion. And like barely anyone plays.